Good morning. You are watching KBC Channel 1 and are in time for live proceedings from the National Assembly. It is Wednesday, 24th April 2019. The Wednesday morning sitting traditionally reserved for private members' bills and motions, and that is what members are expected to do this morning, transact business that concerns them, that which they have sponsored, that in addition to a procedural motion seeking the exemption of business from the provisions of the standing orders. It will be moved by the leader of Majority Party, Honorable Aden Duale, and this will be to allow members debate on the President's address. It will be day one of that debate. That address was delivered in this House early this month, and after which the President tabled in the House 3 reports. One, an annual report on the progress made in fulfillment of the international obligations of the Republic of Kenya. Another on measures taken and progress achieved in realization of national values and principles of governance. And the third, a report to Parliament on the state of national security. Members will be able to give their views as concerned that State of the Nation address delivered by His Excellency the President Uhuru Kenyatta. But before that, they have their own private bills to consider this morning. 3 are listed. They will be coming to the House for the first time. It will be the introduction, the first reading of the Public Order Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of the year 2019. It is sponsored by Member of Parliament Ruiru constituency, Honorable Simon Kingara, and it seeks to amend the Public Order Act and make provisions for organizers of public meetings or public processions leading to loss of property, life, or earnings to take responsibility for the loss and compensate the affected persons. His counterpart, Kitui Central, Honorable Makali Mulu, will have the introduction of his bill as well, the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16, that seeks to provide for an accountable process for allocation of funds for purposes of running the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Board. And the main objective will be to just make sure that it attains what it is meant to do, and that is ensuring that everyone benefits from that particular fund. The Labour Relations Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of the year 2019, is the third bill that will be introduced in the House this morning. It is sponsored by Kikuyu Member of Parliament, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah. A live broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. My name is Vereso Mwanga. On behalf of the entire crew, including the sign language interpreter Leonida Kaula, I do wish you a good morning. Enjoy the proceedings.
I've appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people. We beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country, and of those whose interests you've committed to our charge. Amen. order, honorable members. We obviously do not seem to have the requisite quorum. Therefore, I order that the bell be rung.
Assembly this Wednesday morning. Wednesday is that day when members of the National Assembly hold two sittings, one in the morning such as this one and another in the afternoon. The morning sitting specifically set aside in order for members to prosecute private members' bills and motions. This morning they are expected to put that aside via a procedural motion to allow them discuss the President's State of the Nation address and also to allow them consider a number of petitions that are before the House. There will be a procedural motion seeking extension for consideration of those particular motions. One is implementation of the localization policy by the Teachers Service Commission. The other is the transfer of technical and vocational education and training of trainers from the Teachers Service Commission to the Public Service Commission. Another petition concerns funding of co-curricular activities in public primary schools. And yet another talks of the release of examination results for one Mr. Nick Onyango by the Kenya Medical Laboratory Technologists and Technicians Board. Those are petitions that are before the House, and members are seeking another 21 days from yesterday in order to consider these public petitions. Also expected this morning a number of questions from 6 members. They will be directing them to the Cabinet Secretaries concerned through the various departmental committees of the National Assembly. The member for Nairobi City County, Honorable Esther Passaris, will be seeking answers from the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government, and she'll be seeking answers as to whether the Cabinet Secretary is aware of the stateless persons living in Kenya, namely the Pemba and the Shona, who are descendants of Burundi and Britain and who do not belong to any nationality, and therefore what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that such persons are registered, especially in the ongoing National Information and Identification Management Systems NIMS registration process that is being undertaken across the country. The member for West Mugirango, Honorable Vincent Mugaka, will also be seeking answers from the same Cabinet Secretary, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, and this concerns the demise of an assistant chief of Charachani sublocation in Nyamira South sub-county. And his concern is that a replacement is yet to be found, or rather an assistant chief to replace the deceased is yet to be posted, and he wants to know when that will happen. Lurambi Constituency Member of Parliament, Honorable Titus Kamala Mukwana, has a number of questions for the Cabinet Secretary, Lands and Physical Planning. And he wants to know whether the Cabinet Secretary is aware of the Kakamega Lands Registry, which only has one land registrar serving 12 sub-counties in Kakamega County, and what action that particular ministry is taking to ensure that more officers are deployed in order to fast-track the issuance of title deeds to residents of Kakamega County. Honorable Charles Nguna, Member of Parliament Mwingi West, will be seeking answers from the Cabinet Secretary, Labour and Social Protection as regards the data for elderly persons in his constituency and whether that has been entered into the systems to enable them benefit from the Older Persons Cash Transfer Program. And he wants to know when that process will be undertaken. The Member of Parliament, Endebess constituency, Honorable Dr. Robert Pukose, has a question for the Cabinet Secretary, Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs, concerning the loan ceiling of the Wezo Fund, especially for groups. And he essentially is wondering whether that particular fund can be increased, and especially the facilitation for administration by committee members, and he wants that amount increased from 540,000 shillings to 1.5 million shillings. So those are some of the questions that members will be seeking from the relevant cabinet secretaries this Wednesday morning. And that is if they attain a quorum, a minimum 50 required in order for business to be transacted in the National Assembly. The Sergeant at Arms, keeping the records there, indicating, noting whether that number can be achieved this morning. The quorum bell is still ringing at the orders of the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Chaboy. And a quorum, it appears, has been achieved as indicated by the Sergeant at Arms, to be confirmed by the Speaker.
Order members. Order members, we now have the required quorum and therefore business will begin. Order members. Order.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
That particular order, we do not seem to have statements, so we'll start straight away with questions. And first on the slot is Honorable Esther Passaris, member for Nairobi City County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to question number 178 of 2019. To ask the Cabinet Secretary of Interior and Coordination of National Government. 1, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that stateless persons living in Kenya, namely the Pemba, the Shona, descendants of Burundi, and the descendants of Britain, do not belong to any nationality? 2, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that such persons facing statelessness in the country are registered, especially in the ongoing National Information and Identification Management Systems, NIMS? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. Next is Honorable Vincent K. Mogaka, member West Mugirango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 42A, subsection 5, I rise to ask my question to the Cabinet Secretary in charge of interior and coordination of national government. One, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that, that following the demise of the Assistant Chief of Charachan Sub-Location in Nyamira South Sub-County in May 2017, a new Assistant Chief is yet to be posted? Roman 2, when will the new Assistant Chief of the said Charachan Sub-Location be posted to the said sub-location? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security also. The next question would have been asked by the member for Lurambi, but he has given an excuse which is reasonable, and therefore it will be put in the next available opportunity when he's able to ask that particular question. So we go to the Honorable Member for Mwingi West, Honorable CNN, Charles Nguna.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the chance. I rise to ask question 185 of 2019. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the data for elderly persons in most parts of Mwingi West constituency is yet to be entered in the system, thus making them unable to enroll and benefit from the elder persons cash transfer programs? 2, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that all the elderly persons included in the database so that they benefit from the funds consistently and are paid in arrears since the start of the program? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, that one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. Next is the member for Endebess, Honorable Dr. Robert Pukose.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask question number 187 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs. And the question is, could the Cabinet Secretary consider increasing the loan ceiling under the WESO fund accessible to groups with the ability to repay up to Kenya shillings 500,000 and further increase the WESO fund budget for administration and facilitation of committee members from Kenya shillings 540,000 to Kenya shillings 1,500,000. Thank you, the Honorable Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before, also before the Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. Next is Honorable Irene Kasalu, member for Kitui County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question 188 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs. Number 1, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the WESO funds meant for 8 constituencies in Kitui County for the financial years 2017, 2018, and 2018-2019 are yet to be released? Question number 2, could the Cabinet Secretary give an undertaking to expedite the release of these funds for the said constituencies? Question number 3, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that such delays do not reoccur in the future? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. That marks the end of that particular order, so we move to the next order.
Order number 8, procedural motion, exemption of business from the provisions of Standing Order 43.
That procedural motion is going to be moved by the Leader of Majority Party.
Mr. Speaker, before I move this procedural motion, it's also a procedure that I think the ICT members who deal with ICT, they need to tell members their username. Yeah, members have, they have the password. Password is the same as the one we use for logging in, but the username is different. So unless you have your username and password, you cannot log in into this system. So I really want the ICT people to. But Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a procedural motion, because even me, I can't get the order paper, and it's showing At the order paper, even there's an order paper for August 2019, but you'll allow me just to read the motion. That this House orders the business appearing on order number 13 in the order paper be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 40, subsection 3, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business sponsored by private members, business not sponsored by the majority or the minority or committee chairs, and is a day meant for the private members' bills and motions. But because of the nature of, again, the calendar and of the House, the moment the President makes his speech on the State of the Nation address and tables all the relevant documents, including the fulfillment of our international obligation by the Republic, the national security status, and of course how his government complies with Article 10 of the Constitution on national values, then the House is obligated to discuss the President's speech and those documents for 4 consecutive sittings. It doesn't give leeway. So this morning, today afternoon, and tomorrow afternoon, we will dealing with the matter on the state of the address made by the President, both on his speech and on the documents he has tabled, which I did it yesterday, and I give a notice of motion for today. So it's an opportunity. And I'm sure it's 4 days, but because of the budget and the other business coming, we will see whether by Thursday at 7 p.m., if there will be no any other member who will be speaking on that leadership from the minority. I will only give the other side is a competent member for Kitui Central, who is a member of the House Business Committee, Honorable Makali Mulu, to represent, because this was a matter decided by the House Business Committee. So I'll ask Honorable Makali Mulu to second.
Very well, Honorable Mulu. Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu.
Yes, a PhD holder, not honorary.
The mic. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to assure the majority leader that this side is well represented. We are up to the task.
You know, I am not, I really can't understand your quarrel. When the leader of majority himself, especially recognized you as one very competent one, but what he said about the minority side is that they were absent, the leadership. So he went to the next competent one, I think.
I'm just saying the leadership, it's only that the seats which are not, but we can sit on those seats and still do the work. No. Anyway, Honorable Speaker, I think this is a house of rules, traditions, and procedures. And normally, under normal circumstances, after the President gives the State of the Nation speech, we are supposed as a house to debate it for 4 sittings, as the majority leader has said. So he has put it very well. I think we just need to pass this procedural motion and start debate.